This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, what's the matter? You got a little smirk on your face. You gonna drop something on me?
Thinking what we're going to talk about. I'm thinking the way boxing has picked up a bit lately. We have a little more summer activity, a little more excitement in the summer.
A little bit of a lull this week, though.
You know, and I was also thinking, Frank, not to mean to dive right into the conversation, and while you were doing your intro, isn't it a darn shame? Such a great fight like Fulton against Inouye, no one is paying attention to it. Right now.
You know what, Jack? It's a shame. You're right. It's overshadowed by Crawford and Spence. And I'll tell you what, Jack, I've watched the first 2 episodes of the All Access with Crawford and Spence, and I can't help. I can't help. I am really jacked up for this fight. I mean, this time in 2 weeks we'll be talking about the result. And Jack, believe it or not, as much as I'm a Terrence Crawford fan, I go back and forth with who I like to win. I just know this much. I don't think there's any way that it can't be a great fight based on the personality and the styles and what's at stake for both guys. And the only thing I can say is this. I don't think I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go with Crawford for one reason. And I just think he has that Michael Jordan, Sugar Ray Leonard intangible that he's just going to win no matter who you are, no matter what you do. And he just has that intangible. I think that when the money's on the table, he'll find a way to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to overanalyze it now because it's still a couple of weeks away. I thought we were going to go a little heavy on it next week. But, you know, why not start now? We could beat the drums. It's a type of fight you can't talk.
It really does deserve it.
At this point. Yeah, we're close to, we're within 2 weeks. We're 12 days away from the fight. But consider this point. The very best of Errol Spence, you're not going to quite ever feel he's going to be as good as Sugar Ray Leonard in the Sugar Ray Robinson territory. You're never going to quite feel that way about him. But Terrence Crawford maybe can get there. You have more of a feeling he can get there, you know, and be a super great fighter. The question is, if you want to make a case for Spence, and you can make a very good case for him, does he have the style to beat Crawford? I think the style matchup actually favors Spence, but I think the upside favors Crawford.
I can see that. Jack, you know what's funny? I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about, I said, you have to go back to the Leonard, Hearns, even the 79-80 version of Duran before you get welterweights of this magnitude, in my opinion. And he said to me, he says, well, how do you think that Crawford would do against Leonard and Hearns the night they fought in 81 and Duran of Montreal? And, you know, I said to him, I said, I'll go with Crawford first. I would probably go in before I see him against Spence, based on what I've seen. I would probably pick all 3 to beat Crawford, but I would not be surprised if he beat one of them, where I would pick Spence to lose to all 3, and I would be very shocked if he pulled out a win in that round robin.
Let's say it was a tag team match. Let's say boxers were allowed to alternate rounds, okay? Or you could tag off to your opponent and the other fighter'd have to back off a few seconds. Crawford and Spence a tag team against the Duran and Leonard in Montreal. I go with Duran and Leonard in Montreal over Crawford and Spence. What about De La Hoya and Trinidad, a tag team together against Crawford and Spence? Now you're talking about something that's fairly even, but can you say with absolute confidence that Oscar and Trinidad wouldn't emerge victorious?
Again, Jack, with me, the wild card would be Spence. I have seen enough of Terrence Crawford as a welterweight that I'm confident that I would pick him to beat Trinidad at 147 and De La Hoya. I'm not sure about Spence. I can see a case where, and again, this all comes down to style because Spence is always going to come forward and be the aggressor. I can see a case where if De La Hoya fights him like he did Trinidad, he's in the fight and has a shot to win. And then if you match Spence with Trinidad, you have two guys that are going to come at each other. And it's basically going to come down to the guy that has the bigger punch and better chin between Spence and Trinidad. I'm not sure who wins that. So I think Crawford would tilt it to Spence and Crawford over Trinidad and De La Hoya.
But Crawford and Spence, getting back to that direct fight, we'll talk about other fantasy fights later. The one thing I would emphasize to Terrence Crawford, if I had his ear and he was seriously listening to me, he can't start slow the way he's done in many other fights. Crawford has lost early rounds in a number of fights because he's so confident once he picks it up, he's going to get the job done and dispose of his opponent, overtake his opponent, and he's done it all the time. But he's lost early rounds of fights, and I suspect that Errol Spence, if you want a prediction right now, is going to win 4 of the first 5 rounds before Crawford starts coming on. But if he doesn't get Spence out of there before the final bell, and he might not do that, you never know how the judges might score a round or 2 in the second half. That could be a swing round, and Spence could emerge with a tight decision because Terrence Crawford could fight a bit the way Marvin Hagler did against Sugar Ray Leonard in the early rounds, basically sleepwalk the first few rounds.
Jack, if what you said happens, I think you're right, but I don't think Crawford sleeps the first couple rounds like he normally does in this fight again, because Spence is going to come after him behind that jab, and he's going to be pumping that jab, and he's going to make Crawford either make him hold, fight, or move. But he's going to force his hand to do something, and I think that's going to cause them to engage more, which means that Crawford may not fall behind early. You know, something else I saw, I forget where it was, but some people are afraid that this fight could be like Pacquiao and Mayweather. And Jack, I just don't see that based again on the styles. Everybody knew that Pacquiao was going to come to Floyd, and Floyd was going to move and counter and pick his spots, wanting to be aggressive and flurry. Crawford is a fighter. He's a boxer puncher. He's a counter puncher. He can punch. And when you put him in with a guy that's going to force the issue in Earl Spence, let's face it, if Spence has to back up against Crawford and we see him inching back, it's over. He can't beat him that way. He has to go to him, break him down, and beat his body down, and then wear Crawford out. But see, doing that, it's like walking into a buzzsaw. So I don't think there'll be many feel-out rounds in this one early. I think we're going to see fireworks early out of the gate.
No, Frank, I don't think Spence is going to be the aggressor throughout the fight, maybe in the early rounds. But when Crawford starts taking it to him and he feels the effects of Crawford's blows, his speed, his fury, I suspect Spence is going to box a lot the second half behind the jab.
And if it ever gets to that point, Jack, Spence is done. He can't beat him that way, Jack. He can't. He can't beat him outside and around the ring. He's got to force the issue.
Remember Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns. You would have said, well, if Hearns has to back off from Leonard the whole fight, he's through. He doesn't have any chance. Or if Leonard has to move into Hearns the whole time, no, he can't beat him that way. And look what happened over a number of rounds.
You're right, Jack, but how many fights can we mention like that where there was actually 3 fights in one and where the boxer became the puncher and the puncher became the boxer? I don't think that Spence, and in this fight, he's Hearns, I don't think he can move and circle and jab and survive against Crawford like Hearns did with Leonard. I just don't think that he can do that, Jack. Well, I did see Hearns box some before he fought Leonard. There were there were a couple guys that pushed him back a little bit. I don't see Spence having the ability to fight in retreat and be successful against a guy like Crawford.
Well, speaking of that other fight, Fulton and Inoue, Stephen Fulton gave his fight plan away, basically, saying he plans to move and box and not get hit. That's the style he plans to fight in, just outbox Inoue over the distance.
But that's who Stephen Fulton is.
But can he execute that plan against Inoue, who's an explosive puncher, an outstanding natural fighter? Inoue can cut the ring off. He throws punches lightning quick in combination. He's just not a powerful puncher. He's a complete fighter. Can Stephen Fulton execute a stick and move plan and, pop Inoue on the way in, tie him up?
Jack Butler did against Inoue for 11 rounds.
Oh, no. Stephen Butler ran against Inoue the whole time.
But, Jack, he still picked his spots and did enough to keep Inoue from steamrolling him for 11 rounds. If Butler can do that, I think that there's a chance that Fulton can do it. And I'll also say this, Jack, he's hitting a guy who is 122 pounds. Solid guy at 122 that's never fought lower than that. What happens if Fulton can take the best shot that Inoue has? Now, I know you're going to say that he can't, but I'm just saying this. If Inoue's power doesn't make Fulton uncomfortable or make him do things that he doesn't want to do, he's going to get outboxed and lose. And then the only thing we have to worry about is, can he get the decision on the road like that? But I think style matchup and size, I'm leaning towards Fulton right now.
I like Inoue, and actually I like Inoue on points, decisively on points. I think when Fulton feels Inoue's power, he's going to be attempting to box. And then as the fight goes on, it's going to be 50% attempting to outbox him and win, the other 50%
survive.
And that's not going to win your rounds. I see Inoue winning 9 rounds to 3, that type of clear decision.
Again, if Inoue can hurt him, Jack, you're right. That'll be the case if he can hurt him.
I want to talk about a show I covered actually for Boxing News this weekend from Detroit. Outstanding amateur making his pro debut, Andy Cruz, who's a lightweight. Andy Cruz was a 3-time world champion as an amateur, Pan American Games winner, an Olympic gold medalist. And Frank, he trains on your turf in Philadelphia.
Who's the Ennis trains them? I know.
Ennis, okay? And he made his debut against the gatekeeper, Juan Carlos Burgos, former world title challenger, but long in the tooth. He'd only won 4 of his last 13 fights. And Burgos had never been stopped in 45 fights before in his whole career. So Cruz wasn't expected to stop him, didn't stop him, but he looked darn impressive in winning every round, okay? And Cruz is going to be a major factor in the lightweight division by next year. He's 28 years old. He handled a 10-round distance easily. And Burgos had all he could do to really survive. It was an impressive showing. But if you want to do a cross comparison, let's face it, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Tank Davis, they would have beaten Burgos the same way. Maybe gotten him out of there, maybe not. Because Burgos is a very tough guy. But
John Davis couldn't get him out.
Right. Well, Andy Cruz is going to be a big-time factor. Matchroom Boxing Matchroom Boxing's Eddie Hearn. Might just be promotional talk, but said he's the most talented fighter he ever signed, and that's very believable. But major talent, Andy Cruz, Philadelphia. And by the way, Ennis, he went to Philadelphia, Frank, because they don't want any distractions to be in the Philadelphia gym. So kudos to Andy Cruz and his people.
Cruz, I think there's some pressure on him to be aggressive so he can be a little bit of a crowd pleaser. Looked like he tried to do that.
He tried.
Against Burgos.
Hurt Burgos.
He has a great future in front of him. He beat Keyshawn Davis, I believe, 3 times as an amateur. And
Davis for the gold medal as well.
Right. And Davis is 8-0. He beat Burgos earlier, 8-0 and 6 knockouts. I like what I see in Cruz, but here's one for you. The Cubans get a lot of press, Jack, and there's a lot of hype around them. Who would you say, what Cuban has come here or just defected and went on to have a great career and become an all-time great? Can you think of any?
All-time great. I mean, Guillermo Rigondeaux comes to mind.
He's in the conversation. That's one.
Not an all-time great. His career wound up being a little disappointing. At one point, he was arguably a top 5 pound-for-pound candidate.
Right.
At one point, maybe not for long.
He hung on a little too long and moved up in weight.
Yeah. And
but so my point is, and Rigondeaux's about as good as we've seen. Who's been the great Cuban fighter that's as a pro?
Sugar Ramos was outstanding, but you're going back like at this point 50 years or so, a little
50,
more than
60 years, 70 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Casamayor was good.
Yeah,
not an all-time great though.
I know what you said.
How about the big heavyweight, Jack? I mean, Luis Ortiz, good, but not great.
We never know what would have been with Teofimo Stevenson.
Right.
Yeah. Teofilo.
But I'm talking about the ones that defected and did go pro. We've really never seen one of them that we could say is a certifiable all-time great. And if I'm missing somebody, you guys send it in because I want to know who it is, because I was thinking about this and I couldn't think of one.
Yeah, that really, really made his mark.
Maybe Phil Tavone would have been that guy, but he never turned pro.
Yeah, maybe as a pound-for-pound candidate you're talking about. But listen, even if Andy Cruz is, let's say, for argument's sake, is a great fighter, it doesn't mean he's going to establish himself as the very best if he's in a division with Shakur Stevenson, Tank Davis, Devin Haney. But Haney's moving up.
That weight class is stacked, Jack, with Martin and Keyshawn Davis coming up. There's a lot, and Cruz. There's a lot there. That division is going to carry the sport for a while, I believe.
Keyshawn Davis is calling out Andy Cruz, but it doesn't always work that way. Like he loses a close fight, he'll get his revenge. For example, Shakur Stevenson loses the gold medal match to Roberto Ramirez. Ramirez is going to be fighting for a title and all soon. He'll win his belt. He's a heck of a good fighter, Ramirez. He really is, but he lost his pro debut, and that somehow sidetracked Shakur Stevenson fight. It was an absolute shock he lost his debut.
Yep.
But he rebounded. He's going to continue to have a heck of a pro career, but Stevenson passed him right after the Olympics, was better. I don't think it works that way with Davis and Cruz, because I think Cruz just flat out, beats him again the way he's done numerous times before. Maybe down the line, Davis does pass Cruz, but no need to call him out now.
Jack, there was a fight this weekend, a lightweight fight, where a guy I'm pretty high on, Frank Martin, had to rally at the end of the fight, the last 3 rounds, to seal the decision. It wasn't one of his better outings. He needed the last 3 rounds. Aratalian is a good fighter, does everything pretty good, but he's not good when he was forced to back up. But, Frank Martin, It wasn't impressive. I think he's got to get a little more experience under his belt before he starts calling out some of the big names like he started to good. He's good, but he needs somebody to light a fire under him. He gave half the fight away, and it wouldn't have been a robbery if the decision had gone the other way. It's like it wasn't a big night.
I meant to ask you about Frank Martin because I didn't see the fight. The show from Detroit was going on at the same time.
Right.
And I covered that, and then I heard the Martin result the next day. You know, I couldn't watch it as if like live. I had things to do, and I wasn't going to wait and go into hiding for 2 days where the result would be kept from me. So I planned to watch the fight at some point. But I heard it was a close fight, and you were indicating it was a close fight. How good is Frank Martin? Because people were talking in terms about him being the future of the lightweight division. I've seen him fight before. I've seen him fight from ringside when I was in Miami, you know, a couple of years ago. I know he's good, but is he necessarily going to get up to a level to be nearly as good as a Shakur Stevenson? I could say an Andy Cruz is going to get up to that level. Whether he beats those guys or not remains to be seen. But you could lump him in that category. Is Stevenson always going to be in the back seat when you talk? I mean, Martin, is he going to be in the back seat when you talk about the elite guys?
You know, Jack, based on what I saw in his last fight, I think he's gifted. He can put his punches together from a southpaw stance. He's good in spurts. I just think he needs a fire under him. And if it's not there now, when is it going to be there? Do I think his ceiling is as high as a Tank or Shakur? No, I don't. But on the right night, he is a problem. He will be a problem for any of the elite guys, but I need to see a little bit more. But I'm willing to say, based on what I've seen, that no, he's never going to be a Shakur or a Tank. And, you know, in a way, that's not really a rip, because those two guys are generational talents. And I think that even Shakur may be even so more than Tank. I think when we look back in their careers in 10 years, God willing, we're here, that we'll think that we'll look at Shakur as being the better fighter. And I still think he will probably be the one to emerge and have the best legacy of that group. But I'll tell you what, Jack, it's a fast track. And if he does that, that says a lot for him.
Yeah, Tank was let out of jail a little early, and I'm kind of baffled with the DA and the judge and everyone. What's going on? He got a lenient sentence as is. And then
Jack, that's the world we live in today. Celebrities and money can do whatever they want.
They got reportedly high-priced attorneys, and the judge and the DA, they buckle, to it, and they let him out.
Are you really surprised, Jack? I'm not surprised. That's America today.
They let him out early. I mean, as if, I got the feeling the DA's office and the judge, they were just scared of Tank. I mean, they're scared of what he brought to the table. They felt threatened in some way, shape, or form to let him out. I hope Tank learned from this. I'm not saying I wanted Tank to spend significant jail time or whatever. But if you're going to give him a sentence, and we saw the rap sheet against him, and he pleaded guilty to it, so I don't want to hear he was innocent. He pleaded guilty to it, and he got 3 months house arrest. Okay, and he botched that up, so the judge sent him to jail. And to get him out early on that, I mean, I just don't get it. But look, good for Tank.
Jack,
yeah.
We live in a society today, and this is across the board, that there are no consequences for bad behavior. And if you're a celebrity and you have money and you have a skill that you can translate into money, and you're capable of making other people and businesses and corporations money, let's face it, the rules aren't going to apply to you. I mean, what would it take for Tank to really have to do jail time, short of him probably murdering somebody? Other than that, he's not going to do a lot of time.
Yeah, well, but okay.
And not that I want to see that, Jack, but it's like the kid, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in trouble down the road.
We both wish Tank well,
Absolutely.
We hope he learned his lesson. We hope he resumes his career, and maybe this helped him out, even like the few weeks he was, incarcerated. Okay,
Jack, there is a fight this weekend.
yeah, there was a fight I want to talk about. Our friend Dennis Rappaport asked me over social media, saying on our show that we should mention this. He was very upset, and justifiably so, with a judge in Detroit named Catalia Chambers. She judged a few fights during the night, and her scores were good throughout the night, except for one fight where it was outrageously bad. And that fight was the local guy, J. Rico O'Quinn. Okay, a super bantamweight from Detroit there. He was fighting a Venezuela, Carlos Mojica. 10 rounds, both guys were going at it. And admittedly, you could say every round was like a toss up. I had it scored a draw. She gave all 10 rounds to the local fighter, O'Quinn. Now, if we were in a court of law, hypothetically, and you played every round individually, you can argue that Mojica, the other guy, won all 10, and you could argue that O'Quinn won all 10, but they're close rounds, what I'm trying to say. But it's kind of outrageous, because if I'm going to flip a coin, if my favorite thing is heads, you have someone flip a coin for you, and you know they love heads. Heads is their thing. And they're not going to get heads 10 times in a row flipping a coin. Come on, let's be honest about it. And her score of 100-90, what an awful score. The other two scorecards, one had O'Quinn up 96-94. I could accept that. The other one was a little wide. I didn't like it, 97-93.
7-3.
I can live with that, okay? But 100-90? I mean, I don't understand. Sometimes I wonder about judges in this sense, Frank. When I'm scoring a fight, I'm always keeping a running total in my head. I'm aware of what round it is. You would think a judge would at least think to throw a couple of rounds to another
especially in a close fight,
to make it look a little better. We had a case like that in the Trinidad de la Hoya fight. The last round of the fight, when Oscar ran away, one of the judges scored it for him, Aram pointed out, because the judge wanted to kind of level things out. The judge, according to Aram, didn't want Trinidad to win decisively. But whatever. But Harold Letterman always used to tell me he looked for an excuse to throw a fighter around if he's getting shut out. If the last round is close and he has it 9-0, he's kind of hoping to give the losing fighter a round, to give him an excuse to do it.
Jack, I didn't see the fight. All I can say is this, and it's something I've harped on. There should be oversight on this, and I do think the judges, when there's a disparity or discrepancy, should have to make their case in front of the panel, assuming that the panel knows what they're watching and their heart and their intentions are all in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, any judge could have a terrible night. I understand that. I don't want their career ruined. I don't want a case, they should never work again. But I'm going to tell you this, if it happens in a very big fight, I don't think that judge should be rewarded with major assignments right after. I think they should have to take a step back, wait a little while before they get elevated again.
Jack, in some way, sometimes I think boxing in certain fights are very hard to score the rounds. Other times it's easy. Again, I didn't see this fight. Something tells me I would be much more cutting if I saw it. Probably would have seen it like you saw it. You had it 5-5. One judge had it 6-4. Another had it 7-3. No one was close to 10-zip. That looks like there was an agenda there, and it's just outright stupid to do that. I mean, you have to think, I've given 8 or 9 rounds to this guy. I got to make it look like I'm looking at both sides here. And there's just no excuse. It's happened in boxing as long as there's been boxing, and it'll be happening long after we're gone.
Yeah.
2 other things, Jack. George Kambosa, who ended the Teofimo Lopez reign as being undefeated. He fights Maxie Hughes this week, a Brit, a Southpaw Brit.
And a live underdog, Frank. A live underdog, Maxie Hughes. I'm not saying he's going to win, but he's a very live underdog.
Okay. Based on what I've seen, though, I think he's tailor-made for Kambosos because he's not a big puncher. And I think Kambosos' aggressive style, and I think Kambosos is rejuvenated now, seeing that Lopez has a lot of success in his mind. He probably thinks he's better than Lopez, the fact that he did beat him. So I think that I think that Kambosos is probably going to have a good night. But my question is, who is broadcasting that fight? Is that Showtime or ESPN?
ESPN.
So we get to hear
your favorite announcer.
We get to hear Timothy Bradley this weekend as the lead guy, the main man for ESPN boxing. Jack, that alone is going to be worth tuning in to hear. And I just want to ask you this. Will he introduce a new term?
I don't know. I mean, I don't try to pay attention. It's annoying, those terms like with the check hook, the
hop pivot, everything that he does, the stab jab.
The sad part about it, listen, Frank, people pick up on it, especially young fighters.
That's why it bothers me. It makes me crazy.
But then it becomes part of our culture. It's automatic. And then everyone's repeating check hook. I mean, it's a count. You talk about a counter hook, check hook.
I mean, the check hook, that's big. Look, I can almost live with that to a degree. It is a counter hook. But it's been impounded in us enough where it's like it's accepted. But the hop pivot and the stab jab and some of the other things he comes up with, I do think you're right. It's for one reason. It's to change the culture of the sport. I don't like that, but I guess I'm an old, grumpy old man. Get off my lawn and turn that music down.
I want to give Tim Bradley a break. If we won ESPN, Frank, all of a sudden they asked you and I to work as part of the crew, I'd be talking about the elevated uppercut.
I wouldn't, Jack. I'd be afraid people were laughing at me. I would think I'd have no credibility. Yeah, Jack, one more thing. Before we get to your favorite part, I saw John Fury, that's Tyson Fury's father. I saw him try to justify the fight with Nagahu against Tyson Fury in October and said that Muhammad Ali did the same thing. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Muhammad Ali, he said when he was the lineal champ, Ali did the same thing. Ali, the year he did the circus with Inoki, fought the top guys in Jimmy Young, Ken Norton, fought Joe Frazier in his last fight the year before in the Throw 'em in the Manila, their rubber match. And it's just not even a fair comparison. Tyson Fury is basically holding the title. And I will say this, look, I think stylistically he matches up with Usyk, and I would probably pick him to win. But, Jack, I am getting tired of what he's doing and how he's holding the title, and everybody, he's holding up the division, and none of the big fights can happen with him. And to me, he's tarnishing his legacy, and he's fighting a guy who is basically an MMA fighter under boxing rules, and it's a sanctioned fight. Now, there is no chance in the world that a guy making his debut, I don't care how big he is, how tough he is, how hard he kicks or punches, can beat Tyson Fury. It's a joke, and I will proclaim right now, Jack, I'm not buying it.
And Mauricio Suleiman, the WBC president, who I personally like, I think's a good guy, he's turned into a joke himself. I laugh at Mauricio. Mauricio says, "Oh, we're sanctioning the fight." I'm just paraphrasing. He's saying because Tyson Fury tried to get a fight with Alexander Usyk, he tried to get a fight with Joshua. No one wanted to fight him. I mean, that's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
Nobody believes that.
No, no one believes it. And Frank Warren is talking about, well, we have no choice. The others didn't want to fight him. Frank Warren is coming off like a complete clown. That's what he is. Frank the clown. I mean, when he talks that way, I know you want to defend your guy, but keep your dignity, keep your credibility.
No, he has no credibility.
No credibility whatsoever when he talks like that. None. How are we going to believe Frank Warren when he's really saying something of substance? I mean, how to believe him now?
The Tyson Fury act has really grown on. I've grown tired of it, and I don't even think the guy deserves any props right now.
Wait. Ben Dowdy, our friend who posts a lot of meaningful things on social media, has come out and said he's not mentioning Fury's name in regard to the fight. He's ignoring it completely. And maybe
Jack,
that's what we should do. Ignore Tyson Fury altogether. I'll tell you what,
Jack,
let's make it packed, you and I, unless one of our viewers puts a comment on. Let's ignore Tyson Fury.
Now we have to talk about him. He's the lineal champ. I can see where Ben's going with that on social media. But look, it is a spectacle. He is the lineal champ. But I think when we talk about, I just think he should be called on the carpet for the baloney that he's doing and how he's holding up the division. And what kind of legacy is that? This guy talks about he's the greatest ever. What's your legacy? Who have you fought? An old Klitschko and Deontay Wilder. Nice wins. They're not all-time great wins.
Yeah, I mean, it's
clean out the division, Jack. Beat Joshua, beat Usyk, maybe beat Zhang or somebody else that's coming up, or even maybe an Anderson down the road. But you know what? Clean out the division, and then we can talk about Hall of Fame or all-time great.
And heavyweights, and now on that Detroit show, Jermaine Franklin, who lost the decision to Anthony Joshua's last time out, lost clearly and lost a controversial decision to Dylan White. He bounced back with a win, and he actually looked good, even though it went the distance. He beat this fighter from Mexico, Isaac Munoz. Munoz was unbeaten, had power, but was a bit clumsy. But Franklin worked really hard all fight, so it was a good win for him. He wants to show he's a little more than a gatekeeper. And who knows? I mean, but kudos to Franklin for bouncing.
Did you notice, Jack? He said he's picking Joshua to beat White.
Yeah. Listen, Joshua can't afford to win a decision over Dillian White. If Joshua wins a decision over Dillian White, he's through. Put a fork in him. He's done. He's done. If he can't stop Dillian White, he doesn't have it anymore. Joshua.
And if he gets stopped by Dillian White, he's done.
He's done. Yeah, but to top point them, I don't care if he wins decisively. I don't care if he wins every round. Dillian White's not durable at all. He's got to get him out of there. I mean, this is his second fight with Derek James as his trainer. He was kind of putting down in a subtle way Rob McCracken.
I saw that.
Right. I mean, come on.
He said he was more involved with the amateurs and whatnot. Yeah, you know what? I don't need to hear that. If it's true or not, we don't need to hear that now. Jack, let me just say this also. Regarding Joshua, I happened the other day to watch maybe 3 or 4 rounds of his first fight with Dillian White. That Joshua and the guy that fights today are two different people. The only thing that they have in common is they signed their name the same. That Joshua was a hell of a fighter. He was an aggressor, an attacker, and he looked like he enjoyed fighting. And I just forgot, and I know I've harped on this, but it's even more than what I harped, Jack. Anthony Joshua is nowhere near close to the guy that fought Dillian White. And if that Joshua was around today, I might favor him over everybody except Fury, because I think Fury's a bad style matchup. But even against Fury, he'd have a shot. But boy, it just the difference is profound in Anthony Joshua in 2015 and 2023.
We'll see August 12th. He has an opportunity to turn things around, but anything less than an impressive stoppage, like I said, doesn't do it for me. And forget about it. He's not going to come back off a bad outing against White. Yeah, he can win other fights, win lackluster decisions, take a cherry pick from, but he won't have it anymore.
I agree. All right, now here's a part of the show that we're going to do again that we did for the first time last week. We're looking back at fights that happened, only we're inserting the loser in his prime to fight the guy that beat him. Like example, last week we did Ali and Holmes. They fought. Ali was 38, Holmes was 30. Holmes dominated the fight. Would he have beaten Ali of 67? Okay. This week we have 6 more. Some of them you picked, some of them I picked. I think on my end, there's going to be a theme here. I'll be interested to see how you go, but let's just start off with number 1. As we know, Carlos Ortiz and Ken Buchanan fought, I believe, on the Ali Patterson rematch undercard. Right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Duran was supposed to fight Ortiz, correct?
Correct.
And he got hurt or pulled out, and
Buchanan came in on 10 days notice.
Right.
It's crazy because when you think of it, it was less than 3 months after he had lost his title to Duran. In this day and age, that would never happen. No. But so this wasn't Buchanan necessarily at his very best because he was essentially a late sub, like I said, on 10 days notice.
And how old was Ortiz? 35, 36?
He was, I think about 36. He was a tired old fighter. He had won something like 10 fights on the comeback trail against club fighters. I mean, guys who weren't even in his league. But it really was a washed up Ortiz. He was nowhere near the fighter he was. A shell of himself.
And Ortiz, that fight was stopped after the 5th or the 6th round, I forget.
After the 6th round, Ortiz quit on his stool. I was at the Garden. I had 4-1-1 for Buchanan. I think one judge may have had it 3 rounds apiece. Ortiz was competitive in the sense that Buchanan wasn't dominating him. Buchanan was just winning rounds. And then Ortiz suddenly ends his career. He quits on the stool. He said, I was exhausted. I was scared of getting hurt. I didn't want to get knocked out. I was scared of getting hurt. I'm never going to fight again. And they booed him out of the ring. And that was a sad thing to me because he meant so much to boxing in New York, and to have the Garden crowd boo him out of the ring. But true to Ortiz's word, he never fought again. He knew he didn't have it anymore. And Buchanan, who was normally a decent guy and gracious, was less than gracious. He was upset Ortiz quit. He said he thinks Ortiz robbed him of a true victory. A classless remark by Buchanan, but he wasn't a classless man.
No. Now, I remember watching that fight that on closed circuit again. That was on the Ali Patterson rematch undercard. And that was in September of 72.
Yeah.
So I'm about 14. And I just remember thinking that Ortiz had no defense and Buchanan was basically could hit him at will. Never really staggered him or came close to putting him down, but just looked like an old man fighting a young man. Buchanan won the fight. Both guys were aggressive counter punchers. In that fight, Jack, if I remember correctly, Buchanan was doing most of the going forward and pushing the fight from what I remember. So if we're going to match them in their prime, I haven't seen as much of Ortiz, prime Ortiz, as I wish I had, and I should go back and watch more of it. But I'm going to just say that prime for prime, I think Ortiz would beat Buchanan by a decision based on, I think he's a little stronger. slightly better puncher, and as good as Buchanan was, and he fought a lot of good guys, he didn't fight the level of opposition that Ortiz did. So I would say that one would be reversed, and Ortiz would beat Buchanan.
I think if you ask me who was a greater fighter, I give a small edge to Ortiz. But we've heard the term styles make fights, and Ortiz himself told me he loved it when guys came to him. Guys who moved away from him gave him a lot of trouble. And a boxer like Buchanan was a bad style for him. Now, Ortiz told me years later, and this wouldn't have happened. He thinks he could have knocked Duran out because Duran came forward. That version of Ortiz would have gotten annihilated by Duran.
He thinks in 72 he would have knocked Duran out?
Yeah, but you know the way fighters are. They forget
right.
This and that. Listen, when I was a kid, Ortiz was on a radio show after he lost his title to Carlos Tio Cruz, his lightweight title. And I called up the radio show and I asked him, was the decision fair? He said, yeah, it was fair, but it was a very close fight. He told me in the radio show. Now, years later, not remembering that conversation, he tells me he was robbed against Tio Cruz. You know, that's the way fighters are the whole time. Things get embellished. But the Buchanan who lost to Duran beats Ortiz because he's quick. It's a wrong style for Ortiz. It's a very
You mean in their prime, you think that Buchanan would beat Ortiz?
9 rounds to 6. Yeah, 9 rounds to 6, maybe 8-7. You know, but Buchanan has the little edge on style. It's not a good style. A fighter who would move into Ortiz, those are the guys Carlos fared much better.
But I think that Ortiz could have lured Buchanan to come to him.
He could have, but Buchanan had tremendous stamina. It would have been a heck of a good competitive fight, close fight.
I'm very surprised at your thought there, but okay, so you think Buchanan wins. All right, that's interesting. We disagree on that, but we both think it's a close decision. Just you have Buchanan, I have Ortiz.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2. These guys fought twice. The same guy won both times, but the second fight, I think Charles was drained from the first fight. Even though he was winning the second fight, I just don't think he was the same guy. So our fight is Ezra Charles against Rocky Marciano.
Well, Charles wasn't winning the second fight. Rocky was, but he cut Rocky's nose.
Well, yeah, they were close to stopping the second fight, right?
Right, exactly.
Because of the cut. That my mistake. That's what I meant to say.
Right.
But after the first fight, Marciano said that was the toughest fight he ever had. Those 15 rounds of Charles defending the title, he said that was the toughest fight he ever had.
And The Rock overtook Ezra Charles the last third of the fight, the last 5 rounds. He overtook
It was even after 10.
And Charles wasn't in his prime any longer. What happens had it been an Ezra Charles in his prime, the same edge as Ezra Charles, who was much better than Archie Moore and got the better Archie Moore head-to-head, the same Ezra Charles who beat Charlie Burley, where everyone was ducking. What if that Ezra Charles was in the ring with The Rock? The Ezra Charles who didn't fade out late in fights, the young Ezra Charles, okay? I'm going with Ezra Charles to upset The Rock on a hard-fought decision. I think he does last the distance. I think Rocky comes on late in the fight, but he doesn't dominate Charles late in the fight. I think Charles could stay with him to a degree late in the fight and win enough rounds the first half, the first 10 rounds, where he wins the fight. Charles by decision, close decision, but I think Charles upsets The Rock. The prime Ezra.
I love Ezra Charles, Jack. I think he's one of the top 7 or 8 greatest pound-for-pound fighters in history.
Yeah, that Ezra Charles,
but I think Rocky is a bad match for him, even though Charles gave him a tough fight both times. The first fight, I just don't know if Charles, even at his peak, could have been any better or do any more than he did against Marciano the first time. And even at that, he could only hold him to a standstill. So I just think that Rocky's determination, his style of grinding him down, his chin, his power. I just think he would always beat Charles to the finish line in a 15-round fight. 12-round fight may be different, but I would favor Rocky to win if they're both at their best. Because, again, I know the birth certificate doesn't agree, but I don't know if Charles could do any more than he did the first time, and it was enough. Just like, a lot of people say, well, the young Ali would have beat Joe Frazier in 71 if he fought him. Jack, I don't know if any version of Ali could have fought better than the one that fought March 8th, and it still wasn't quite enough. So,
I'm thinking of Charles that fought Joe Louis around that time, who, beat Joe
that
Louis.
was 2 years earlier. But you know what, Jack? Lewis was just a statue, and it was target practice for Charles. That way, it wouldn't be that way with Rocky. Look, could Charles win? Yeah, he could cut him. He could outbox him. But if we're forced to pick here, I think Rocky wins regardless. Just size, strength, power, durability, the whole bit. All right, now the third one. These guys also fought twice. The first fight, the loser had a hard time making weight. And I was at both fights. And the second time, it was a total massacre. And Matthew Saad Muhammad was never the same fighter again. So our fight is Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Dwight Muhammad Qawi. Jack, I know both of these are new. I know Dwight well. I knew Saad well. I sparred with both of them. I watched them train. I used to run with Qawi. I think they're two of the more underrated all-time greats. I think Saad 79 to 81 could live with any light heavyweight in any era, and I think the same thing applies to Dwight. I think the result is the same, Jack, because I just think even though people think of Qawi as a slugger, he was a very smart fighter. He was hard to hit. He had really long arms. He had a good jab. And, Jack, he had a way of making Saad punch down and miss and then came up and counter him. I don't know if that changes, even if it's prime Saad. I think Dwight would beat Matthew prime for prime. It would be a hell of a fight. I could see him being ahead in the fight, and then Saad stops him. But Dwight turned out to have a pretty good chin. I think Dwight, because of his style and his temperament, I think he would win.
Well, it's called Miracle Matt, okay? Because he always would wage these unbelievable comebacks. But you don't wage these unbelievable comebacks against a fighter like Dwight Muhammad Qawi. If he has you on the brink of being stopped and you start coming back, you're not going to get a Dwight Muhammad Qawi out of there. Maybe you'll rock him, you'll put him on the defensive, you'll take over the fight for a little while, but you're not going to finish him off. I mean, this isn't Yaki Lopez we're talking about, who was a heck of a fighter. This isn't Jerry the Bull Martin, who you came back and won against. This isn't, a number guy.
This is a stronger version of Marvin Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great example over there.
And Dwight really had a good jab, and Matt was bothered by a jab. All right, so we both like Dwight.
And Qawi was durable, but it's a much better fight. Because Saad Muhammad had underrated boxing abilities. He was strong. He'd hang in there. And maybe it would go the distance. Maybe Qawi would have to settle for decision victory. I could see that against the peak Saad Muhammad. Qawi would either stop him late or it would go to the cards, and Qawi would.
Okay, we both like Dwight. Let's get to the next three. Ken Norton versus Jerry Cooney. I'll take that first. Jack, I'm sorry. Jerry Cooney at his best, I just think, is all wrong for Ken Norton. I think Norton, we've seen against punchers, he's not at his best. He's not good backing up. Jerry Cooney was a fast starter. Norton wasn't a fast starter. Cooney would back him up. I don't know if he gets him out in 54 seconds, but I think Cooney would stop Norton if they both fought at their best.
I agree with you, but I have a small reservation. Even though I do agree with you, Norton was clearly a better fighter than Cooney. Clearly.
He had a better career. There's no doubt about that.
Norton that fought Muhammad Ali 3 times. It's hard to imagine Cooney just disposing of him and owning a guy like that. The Norton who beat Jerry Quarry, the Norton who went toe-to-toe with Larry Holmes. But with that said, where's Norton going to go with Cooney in front of him? I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to be hard to execute a
And
plan.
Cooney's size and Norton's
Yeah.
is not going to be able to hold him off with a jab. So we both like Cooney. Okay, this one I go back and forth. Mike Tyson against Lennox Lewis. So we're talking 88 Mike Tyson against Lennox Lewis, probably in the late 90s through 2000. Jack, every time I'm asked to pick a Mike Tyson fight against another great, I'm always afraid because of the character issues that Mike Tyson had. Now, you add to that, he was bothered by tall guys that could jab and beat and hit him on the way in and time him. That's Lennox Lewis's bailiwick. Lewis can also fight inside. And when Lennox Lewis was in shape and he was focused, he was never knocked out and he never lost. If he fought Mike Tyson in his prime, if they're both at their best. Now, even though they're the same age, their primes were 10 years apart. I think I would favor Lennox Lewis, but I wouldn't bet on it.
That's a matchup that if they fought a few times, let's say 3 times, 4 times, neither guy would sweep through.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But Lewis just is the bigger guy, Jack, with the style and the reach. And look,
Tyson had difficulty with bigger guys, but keep this in mind about Lennox Lewis. He never backed away from a fight. A guy came at him. Yeah, but I shouldn't say that. Against David Tua, he boxed smartly. He basically.
But and that's the key word, Jack. Smartly.
Very smartly. I give him credit. I don't see him fighting the same fight with Tyson because Tyson would get inside. He was quicker than Tua moving in. Tua was, you could argue, a harder puncher than Tyson if you wanted.
I think Tua beats Tyson head to head, but I think Tyson beats guys that Tua would never beat.
Yeah. And
Tua was the more gifted. I mean, Tyson was more gifted and skilled and a much tougher matchup for Lewis.
And Lewis's chin was, average when you look at it. I mean, you could say a little better if you want. Fine. Oliver McCall, the first fight, you could argue, well, maybe they shouldn't have stopped him. McCall hurt him badly with one punch.
I thought he was hurt. I had no problem with that stoppage.
Okay. And Hasim Rahman knocked him out with one punch.
That was a shot. He was.
But regardless, okay? So there's 2 fights, so that's not exactly a fluke. And could Tyson outpoint Lennox Lewis? Lewis would smother him a lot, but I think Lewis had too much pride to fight back enough where Tyson would be able to hit him at various points with his big blows.
So you like Tyson?
A small lean to Tyson right now. But if we talked about this, Frank, in a few weeks, it's a type of thing you reassess, even though neither guy's going to box again.
Jack, if Mercer could give Lewis the trouble he gave him, it looks good for Tyson. If Razor Ruddock and Tony Tucker and Douglas could do to Tyson what they did, then it looks good for Lewis. I agree with you. A slight edge to Lewis. I wouldn't bet on the fight, and I can definitely see a path for Tyson winning. But if I have to pick today for this on this show, I would favor Lewis. All right, our last one. These guys fought. I was at the fight. It was called Battle of the Balds. Bad Benny Briscoe against Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Hagler boxed, used the ring. He wanted no part of trading with Benny that night. That's smart. Benny couldn't get to him. I'm not sure that even prime Benny gets to Hagler. If Hagler decides, we're not going to fight, I'm going to box, and I'm going to use the ring, and I'm going to pick my spots, I think Benny wins rounds. I do. I think it's in the fight, and I can even see some people thinking that maybe he could have earned a decision, but I would give Hagler the slight edge because I don't think neither guy could knock the other guy out, but I think Hagler has more tools and is the better boxer.
We probably should pick up on this next week because we're running out of time. I'm just going to say this. Outside of you and Russell Peltz, I don't think anyone, as much as we all respect Benny Briscoe, actually thinks prime for prime he would beat Marvin Hagler. Has a very good shot at beating Marvin Hagler.
I picked Hagler.
I know you pick Hagler, but you give Benny, you think it could be a controversial decision in some people's eyes.
if Vito Antuomo could give Hagler that much trouble, I think Benny is as good as Vito or better, and I think it would be a tough fight.
Vito beat Benny at the Garden. Okay?
Come on, Jack. How old was Vito and how old was Benny?
Well, we'll talk. We could pick up on that next week.
All right. That's about it. Next week, we'll look at Inouye and Fulton. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next week.